Hi there, my name is Carlene Shawn from Kids Play Preschool, and I am the chair of the Manna District Child Care Association.
Hi, I'm Sherry Jean from Mother Nature's Preschool and also a member of the Manna District Child Care Association.
We're excited to be celebrating our 30th anniversary as an association this year. We have 70 members with over 300 early childhood educators. That includes everybody from preschools, daycares, out-of-school care, and family day home agencies. We recently had a conference here at the Manna College, and we're excited to bring you the following session. Please enjoy.
Welcome everyone. This is the session called Professionalism in Early Learning and the Role of a Professional Association. I'm Joanne Keilty.
And I'm Manna Middleton. I was just going to mention that I'm the chair of the association that I'll be touching on a little bit later on in the presentation.
So our presentation today is set up in two parts. The first part, we're going to look at professionalism in early learning in a general sort of way. Talk about what a profession is, characteristics of a profession. I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of talking, and then we're going to look at the connection between professionalism and being a part of a professional association. And Manna is going to do that part. I feel a little bit like Vanna, and Manna will do that part, like I should dip a little bit. We have all ages represented here today, so thank you. It's nice to get a sense of where people are at. So I have to, do my thing. We couldn't get the clicker to work, so we're doing it manually. So this is our plan for the afternoon. We want to look at these topics, and you all have handouts, so all the slides are there if you want to. I want to start by talking about professionalism in general. I was kind of listening as people were coming down the hall to what people were saying as they were coming towards the presentation. And the comments that I was hearing were the kinds of ones that I think of when I think about professionalism. What is it in early learning? Because professionalism in early learning is different than it is if you're in the legal field or if you are in a business field. So what is it in our field? I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of reflection and discussion, and I'm really pleased that you're sitting with your colleagues because that means you'll have an opportunity to talk with your colleagues about your perspective on professionalism. I want to give you a perspective, characteristics of a profession. So when we look at the big picture of what is a true profession, what are people saying about what a profession is? And then we're going to look at professional values, and I'm going to use the Alberta Early Learning and Child Care Curriculum Framework to help frame that perspective as we look at that. Is everyone familiar with the curriculum framework? I guess I should say, is anyone not? Because I can give a little overview, but everybody is, so that's great. And then Manna is going to give you some information about AECEA, which is our professional association in the province of Alberta, who AECEA is, what AECEA does, the framework that AECEA has for the educators within our field, and then at the end, we want to hear perspectives, questions, ideas, thoughts from you. So that's the plan. So this little video clip is in my backyard. This is one of my grandsons. And when we think about our profession, these are the kinds of situations that we think about, obviously, right? You probably set up provocations or invitations to play like this. And this was an invitation to play that I set up that obviously involved adding bits and pieces of things from the garden. And there was a great deal of soup making that day. Everything is edible. So even though it comes from the garden, it can be eaten, and you would expect that, except for it's a flower garden, not a vegetable garden. So when we're talking about what is a professional in early learning, these are the kinds of experiences and environments that we're talking about. So let's start looking at this in a little more detail. So if you know the curriculum framework, you know that one of the statements from that framework is that the child is a mighty learner and citizen. I love that phrase. I think they captured what so many of us believe about children in that phrase. So in early learning, that's what we think of children. We think that they are mighty learners and that they are citizens who have rights within our society right now. And when we look at what professionalism in early learning means, then that governs our behaviors. If we believe that statement, then it means that we are going to do certain things, and there are certain things that we will not do with young children. So there are specific ways of being with young children in early learning that are different than there are for educators in experiences or classrooms with older children. So some of you work with children who are in the early school age years, and even your practices are going to be different. So in early learning, one of the things we do, and I'm going to crouch down just David so you know, one of the things we do is this, right? We get down to the child's level. So we're at eye level with children rather than standing over top of them. Well, when children get to be 9 or 10, that would be a little silly because then you'd be doing this to see them. So there are specific ways of being with young children that reflect the profession and our professionalism. It means that the individuals within that profession are committed to ongoing professional learning within the field. So this is, you are obviously involved in this because here you are today, not only being kept up to date within your profession, but in a session on professionalism. So it's like double professionalism for you in this session. One of the things in the curriculum framework, and one of the things that you hear about a lot in sessions like the ones that you've been in today, is that this is a field that highly values reflective practice. So if you are familiar with the framework, you know that it's a significant piece within the framework that educators must reflect on their practices. When educators are not reflecting, nothing changes. They aren't capable usually of growing. They tend to do the same things over and over and over again. So professionalism in early learning means that we are highly reflective. We're collaborative, creative, there's support, and we're current and up to date in the field. One of the things that I would like you to think about today, to reflect on and think about, and then also to go back to your colleagues within your program, professionalism and ethical behavior are closely connected. And we could do, a whole afternoon on ethics in early learning. But when you think about your professionalism, I want you to also consider which code of ethics do you use in your program to guide your practice? And can any of you tell me, in your program, which code of ethics are you using to guide your practice? Respect for the children. But is there a specific code, like the Canadian Child Care Federation code, or do you use NAEYC's code of ethics? If you are members of AECEA, you are also members of the Canadian Child Care Federation. They have excellent information on their code of ethics. NAEYC, which is the American National Association for the Education of Young Children, has a very extensive code of ethics. And if you don't have a code of ethics that you're using, my question to you would be, as professionals, why? What code of ethics are you using? That's a significant piece of professionalism. When you, as you do daily, face ethical decisions or ethical situations that require ethical decisions, how are you making those decisions? And some of you would say, well, experience. Experience is good. Education, okay? But what guides you as a group? What guides you as a team, as a staff in a program to make those ethical decisions? Do you all agree to the code of ethics? And if you do, that's great. If you don't, then what do you do? So a big piece of professionalism in early learning is to consider what your decisions around ethical dilemmas are. So if that's something that you haven't considered with your staff team, look at it. If you go online, you can find the Canadian Child Care Federation's Code of Ethics. You can find NAEYC's, and that's also something that's in the framework, right? Something that's coming from AECEA. So Manna will talk about that a little bit further on. Any comments or questions about this part? So I just want to mention this is obviously another provocation. Did anybody take the outdoor play session this morning? A few people with Christina. Sometimes people look at this photograph and they're concerned and they think about part of their professional responsibility, of course, is children's safety, as it should be. We must keep children safe. That's a baseline in professionalism. Sometimes people look at this and they're concerned. I've had quite a few people look at this and they're concerned. This is my grandson Simon when he was just around 12, 14 months. The rope is a big concern, right? What if he wraps that rope around his neck? But the thing that people often say to me is, what if he falls over and he hits the stump? And for one thing, my first question for most people is, where do you think I am? I'm not far away. We never send children into these situations and leave them alone. We supervise. We carefully supervise. We ensure children's safety. You may have, with Christina, looked at some of those kinds of things, because outdoor play and risky play are two things that are very trendy in our field right now. And it is important as professionals that we consider those situations. A code of ethics can actually help you make some of those decisions and help you provide information to parents and families and your coworkers about what you're doing. This is some information for you as educators in terms of the cycle of professional practice. And if you took part, or if anyone is taking part in the there's a session on emergent curriculum in inquiry-based. Do I have the title right? I may have totally mixed up the title. This cycle of professional practice fits in terms of the inquiry cycle or the inquiry practice or approaches with young children. So when we are looking as professionals at what we do, we go through a cycle like this. It probably seems very familiar to you. We look at what we're going to do. Our practice evolves. And then it's open to professional challenge. If any of you are not familiar with or don't know what code of ethics your center follows, you have been challenged. Right? There it is. Practice is open to professional challenge. Because I'm saying to you, go back and ask. Go back and look. Think about it. Then we change as we get more information. So perhaps today, as a result of that question, some things may change in your program. Or perhaps today, as a result of another session, you go away with a little note or something and you're thinking, what am I going to do? And then it's defined, our practice is defined and redefined. And then we're continuously examining our practice. This is a part of professionalism in early learning. If we are not continually evaluating our practice and reflecting on it, we are missing one of the most critical pieces in our evolution as teachers. Otherwise, we get into that habit of doing the same thing over and over and over again, and it's just we do it because we do it. And I've heard educators say that. We do it because that's always what we've done. Well, because that's always what we've done is not a good reason for professional practice. It needs to be examined. And then practice evolves and around we go. This is a photograph that I took in a park in Lethbridge, and I love this tree stump. This is another example of the kinds of practices that we engage in as professional educators in early learning. Again, some of the challenges come as people think about things like safety and risk and so on. And as professionals, you need to be able to explain, articulate, justify, some might say, why you would choose this type of practice. Why would you choose to have a child at that height? It's not, it actually maybe looks a little bit higher than it is. It probably was about this high. Why you would choose to have a child crawling on a rough surface like that at that height. What's the advantage of having him crawl or giving the opportunity? Because I didn't put him up there. Why would we do that in early learning? Yeah, they need risk. They need risk. And you may not agree with me, but if you don't, and that's perfectly fine, if you don't agree with me, go back and research it. Why do I say they need risk?
They're not scared so much in life, like,
Yeah.
like,
They're more apt to go and get in on anything if they're taking on that kind
they're not
of.
so scared of things.
Yeah.
Comes with risk.
Yeah, it does.
Maybe something in way up high somewhere in his occupation.
Exactly.
You know, and then the fear of height is
Right.
gone.
Yeah.
They need a new experience.
Pardon?
They need a new experience.
They do. And I don't
It's
think
exciting for some kids though too.
it
like,
is.
literally.
I don't think Lucas had ever had the opportunity to crawl on a tree trunk like that. And that was a cottonwood tree, and so the bark is so cool. Sometimes you can stand beside a tree and feel it, but it's very, very different to have the opportunity to crawl on that. So as professionals, part of what we do in our professional practice is that we consider what learning opportunities, what lifelong learning, if you will, this situation creates. And then we provide those kinds of experience, and our practice evolves. And then it's challenged, and then we get new information from people like Christina about why children need this type of outdoor play, and on it goes. But in order to be in that professional cycle, you need to have those kinds of elements occurring, and you need that challenge to reflect and think. We need to be thinking teachers, educators, as we work with young children. So what I want you to do now, I think most of you are with colleagues, and if you're not and you want to move to be with colleagues, that's fine. And if you are like this table, I don't think you all work together, but there's a nice group of 3 there. I want you to just talk about this question. What do you think professionalism in early learning means? I've given you some ideas. You can use those ideas, but what do you think? What does it mean to you? What is professionalism in early learning? Jot your answers down, please. You don't have to hand them in, but I do want to ask you to share some of your ideas. So about 5-7 minutes. So the question that I asked you, what do you think about professionalism? What do you think professionalism means in early learning? Is connected to the earlier questions that I asked you. One was about the curriculum framework. So that's the Alberta Early Learning and Childcare Curriculum Framework. And if you do not have access to a hard copy of that and you want to refer to it, you can go online, childcarecurriculumframework.com. They being the authors of the curriculum framework, have just, well, not just, a year ago, released a new version, an updated version called Flight. And if you go to flight.ca, you'll find the newest version of the curriculum framework. So the curriculum framework, as the name would suggest, frames our practices. It says, here is a frame, and within that, here's the information that explains what we, as professional early learning and childcare educators, need to think about. It doesn't tell you what to do, but it tells you need to think about these things. So in your programs, if you're looking at what code of ethics are you using to guide your practices, I mentioned CCCF, the Canadian Child Care Federation, or NAEYC, which is the National Association for the Education of Young Children. Those are 2 that I would suggest that you go to. They will help to form and frame what you believe professionalism means in early learning. The next slide gives us the characteristics of a profession, and I'll explain a little bit about that, and the author of that information. We never just work with the children, right? Sometimes I taught at the college in Lethbridge in the AECEA program for many, many years. And sometimes people would come into the program, coming into the profession, and they would say about how much they enjoy working with children, which is critical, obviously. But I would say to them, but you're never just going to work with children. They come with families. They come with grandmas and grandpas, and I'm one of them who's there in the program now. They come with aunties and uncles. They come with their pets, not physically, but they represent all of those other people and creatures. So yeah, very critical, that role.
A few minutes to build the adults' capacity.
Exactly.
And what they need to do and it benefits the kids.
Critical to build that capacity for families. Yeah, I like that. Don't be afraid to flaunt your professionalism.
Yeah, and the
Show
trust
it.
and the respect and trust.
Yes.
With the coworkers and everybody around.
Yeah.
The families. Yeah.
Excellent ideas and suggestions. And you're going to see that. This is taken from Stephanie Feeney's work on the Code of Ethics and Guidelines for Practice from NAEYC. So Stephanie Feeney was one of the authors of the NAEYC Code of Ethics. And what you'll find if you look at codes of ethics across not only Canada, but other places in the world, many organizations have taken NAEYC and used that information to build their own code of ethics. And there's a reason for that. NAEYC spent, I think, probably close to 15 years researching, talking to people in the field to develop theirs. So a little bit of history and background to that. But the characteristics of a profession. So in early learning in Alberta, we have the field of early learning and childcare. We are not yet a formal profession the way that other professionals are, such as doctors and lawyers. We are not yet a profession, and Manna is going to talk or touch on that a little bit in the 10-year framework from AECEA. But that doesn't mean that we don't view ourselves as professionals and that we are not able to think about how we behave as professionals in this field. We do, and you are evidence of that with all of the excellent ideas you gave. But when you compare the ideas that you heard to this list, think about what that means in our field. An ongoing commitment to continuous learning. I would say, check, here you are, this is what you're doing. Recognized and upheld standards of practice. What standards of practice does your program refer to? Anybody know?
The licensing standard.
No, licensing. Licensing standards are minimum standards for childcare.
Best practices.
Okay?
Best practices.
You have the best practices document. You might refer to ELK's standards. You might look at what Human Resources Canada through the Early Learning Sector Council has developed. I'm sure you've seen some of those. They have extensive standards for early learning. And if you're not familiar with those, Google them and have a look at them because there's some excellent information there. Do we all follow the same? No, we don't. So in many most professions, there is standard practice, not a whole bunch of standard practice. There's something consistent within that profession. An accepted code of ethics to which the professionals are accountable. Right now, many of you are going to go back and talk with your colleagues about this, but do you have a code of ethics that you're referring to? If you don't, I'm saying to you, I think you need to. And then if you go back and decide, well, we're going to follow this code and we're going to follow this code, we don't have that accepted code of ethics yet. We're not held accountable to it unless we have accountability within our own program. So that one, not so much. Rigorous requirements for entry to training and eligibility to practice. No, nope. We do not have that. In order to get into medical school, for example, anybody here know someone who's gotten into medical school? probably you know of some people. It's not an easy process. It's a rigorous process. Many, many, many people apply and only a few get in because there are rigorous requirements for entry, and in order to be eligible to practice, you have to prove that you can practice. We do not have that in our field yet. Commensurate salary. Does everyone want to have a little chuckle right now? Right, we're not there yet, right? This is good work that is being done on your behalf, but we're not there yet. Autonomy or self-governance of the profession. Well, right now, who governs your programs?
Licensing, nice good.
They don't govern it. They tell you what the licensing requirements are. Who's in charge?
Isn't it, like we follow Alberta Child Care Regulations, so it's the Alberta Child Care Act that governs.
Right, and so then licensing comes out of that act, and that determines whether or not you get a license. But who's responsible for making decisions within your programs? Yeah, right. There isn't really a governing body as such that oversees all of these programs. We do have a licensing requirement, so there's licensing.
Be unlicensed.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There's some accountability there, but we do need to remember that licensing standards are minimum standards. Minimum standards. So that's something to keep in mind. Recognition of the profession. We're not there yet. This is not a recognized profession. And if you look in AECEA's good work in the 10-year framework, then that's something to consider. A specialized body of knowledge not normally held by others. Do you think we have that? I think so too. You mentioned that. There's knowledge we have about working with young children that not everybody has. Do you find yourself explaining to family or friends sometimes about what you're doing, and you may hear people saying things like, oh, it must be nice to play all day.
babysitter.
Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't do your job.
Right. Sometimes we do hear recognition and support. I don't have the capacity to do that, and I'm glad that people do have the ability to do that.
That's what I hear a lot. I
Yeah,
don't have the patience.
right. We do hear those cliches. I don't have the patience, that sort of thing. Yeah. So there is a specialized body of knowledge. And those of you who have been through early childhood education programs at colleges or university know this to be true. There is a specialized body of knowledge. Preschool children are different than elementary school children, who are different than middle school children, and so on. So when we compare our list, you kind of get an idea for where we are. This is also another piece from NAEYC, and this is something that I would encourage you to, if you Google it, this will come right up, because it's very teeny on your handouts. This is a statement of commitment that NAEYC, so the National Association for the Education of Young Children out of the States, has with it as a part of their code of ethics. And they're saying that people who work in this field and who view themselves as professionals need to consider this. These are the things that we should be doing, they say. And I know of programs who have chosen to adopt NAEYC's code of ethics, and then they have their staff look at this and ask if they can agree to this before they begin working in the program. I think that's a fabulous practice, to be honest. If you're going to be working in this program, are you able to agree to all of these things? Somebody mentioned respect. Obviously, never harm children, right? That's the absolute foundation. We must keep them safe. That doesn't mean they won't fall and bump themselves or those kinds of things, but we're never going to put them in danger. And then can you agree to those kinds of things? I'm not going to go through them because you can read them and think about ways in which you might use those if you're the director of a program, or also as educators. Is this something you would bring to your group and say, is this something we can consider? I'm going to give you some more information that I want you to consider in that way. So I said that I was going to use the curriculum framework values. Sorry, the curriculum framework, and I'm using it to examine professional values in our field. And I want you to think about, how does this compare with the excellent lists that you all shared, or statements or definitions of professionalism that you shared. So in the curriculum framework, on page 20, this is of the new version, Flight, the authors have included a section on values in early learning. And our beliefs, our practices, our ways of being with children are based on our values. Right? The things which we value become the ways in which we interact with children. So I think for educators, it's always a good idea to go back to, what do you value? What do you believe is important when you're working with young children? And the curriculum framework is an excellent document for you to use. It's meant for you to use. It's free for you to use. So the authors of the framework have said, these are the values for early childhood communities. Democratic citizenship is one. Equity, intercultural competence and communication, and environmental sustainability. So you could ask yourself, do we do this in our early childhood community as professional early childhood educators? Are we supporting democratic citizenship? What's an example of how you support democratic citizenship developing in your programs?
Just giving all the children a chance to do tasks, I guess.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yes. Opportunities for children to be involved in different tasks. I heard children having a voice.
Yeah, expression of
Yes.
their feelings and
Yes.
yeah.
Do you ask the children when they're finished at snack to put their garbage in the garbage container? Yeah, we do. Democratic citizenship. You want to live in communities with people who do that when they're adults, right? We want children to grow up to be members of community. So these are things for you to consider as educators, as professionals. Can you support these values? They also include values for early learning processes. So the values for early learning processes, if you look at those, many of the sessions that you were engaging in today, and I think as Lana was speaking this morning, I'm sure you heard some of these things, active engagement and participation. We don't say to the children, okay, you sit there and watch. Good luck. It does not work with young children. We engage them actively. Meaning making and co-constructing of knowledge. If that's new language to you, go online, flight.ca. Have a look at what the authors of the curriculum framework say about what that means for you as professional educators. Play and playfulness. We know children learn through play. They do not learn in a didactic situation where we say, this is the only way to do it this way. That's not how children learn. Creativity, using their imagination. Multimodal literacies. Is that new terminology for you? Okay. Google, flight.ca. Look it up. What does it mean? Because I think when you go in there and you read it, you're going to go, oh, okay. The language may be different, but when you think about yourself as professional educators, how does this fit? Consider that. Interconnectedness of ideas. Do you know the term scaffolding? Okay, we do this all the time with children. They're at this level of understanding with something, and we might add an idea or ask a question or provide materials that give children an opportunity to consider how ideas are connected. Reciprocity of relationships. Capacity building, there it is. Diverse perspectives for learning. Do every one of the children that you have in your 3-year-old group learn in the same way? No. Do you all learn in the same way? No, right? It's human nature, as somebody mentioned to me earlier. It's human nature. Inclusiveness. We understand the importance, the critical nature of inclusive environments for young children. Can you agree to these values with the people you work with? You don't need to answer me, but consider that. Are these the values that you support in your early learning processes? And the final one, values for meaningful family relationships. Right? This is critical. Mentioned before, you are not just working with children. You work with the entire family. Some of you, depending on the type of program you operate, more than others. But everybody, if you're working with young children, you are working with their families. So we have to have knowledge of those families and appreciate them, their values, their social and cultural practices and traditions. If we say we believe that to be true, then as soon as that parent leaves the building, we cannot go like this. Manna, did you hear what she said? Do you know what she said to me this time? Right? We can't do that. If this is something that we value, gossip and those other types of practices cannot be a part of what we do. So that is a piece of our professionalism, and that is governed by a code of ethics. It's all connected. Professionals in early learning cannot engage in that kind of practice if they say they value this. Then they certainly have, if they do, they certainly have to reflect, right? And what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Valuing the fact that children belong to family and community, and that they learn from elders in their community and from community leaders. That's an interesting one to think about. What are the connections in your programs for children like that? And then we value respect and social responsibility within the family and within the community. So again, I would encourage you to take those and think about them. Ask yourself, do I believe this? If I do I just say it or do I believe it? There's a difference, right? We can all say the things, but do I believe it? Is this what I really believe is critically important? And am I practicing that? What are the things that come out of these statements? It's one thing to say, I believe that children belong to family and community, but what does that mean in terms of what I'm going to do with the children on Monday morning? Next slide, please. This is another piece from Flight. In the curriculum framework for Alberta, the authors say that the role of the educator is building relationships. If you've read through it, you know that already. But they say that's what our role is, building relationships. And very often when we're thinking about professionalism in early learning, people think about, well, what kinds of activities am I going to do? What sorts of invitations will I offer the children? What will the environment look like? What materials am I going to have? Do I have enough loose parts? Those are all important things. But what's the root of that? The curriculum framework says the root of that is building relationships with children, with their families, within the community, and every one of your programs is a community, and then you're in a bigger community, and then you're in a bigger community. And that list of attributes or attitudes that we respect, that we're inclusive in our environments, that we believe that social justice is something to attain. Democratic citizenship. We're open-minded and we believe in relationship building. I think more than anything, this information is the foundation for critical reflection for us as educators to think about, do I believe this? And if I believe this, then what does that look like in what I do Monday morning? And if I believe this, or if I don't believe this, then what happens? What are the implications for the children, my colleagues, the families? So there's a tremendous opportunity for self-reflection that comes out of this information. And the last one for me, this is an article that I would encourage you to have a look at. And One of the courses that I used to teach at the college was about ethics in early learning. And every year I would go to this article. It's old, and I keep thinking there's got to be something newer. So I would search through journals and periodicals looking for something new. And I did that again this past week. And you know what? The first article that popped up, this one. So this is one of those seminal articles in early learning that I think there's value in us returning to. Have you heard of Lillian Katz? She's like a guru in early learning and childcare in North America. She wrote this article, obviously, in the 1980s. And in the article, she says there are 3 categories of professionals. She says there's the professional, early childhood educator. There is the non-professional, early childhood educator, and there's the unprofessional, early childhood educator. So the professional is the one we've been talking about, the one who reflects and thinks and has a code of ethics that she and her group refer to, and is using the most up-to-date research and information, like the curriculum framework, is critical in a positive way about practices and environments. Then there's the non-professional. And you may have many of these people who come into your program as volunteers. It may be parents, it may be other members of the community, and they want to be with children and have that opportunity to work with children, but they don't have the background. And they still have tremendous value within the program. Perhaps there's a grandma. I come in with my grandson. I pick him up from kindergarten and I bring him to daycare every day. And he got there a little late and then would eat lunch. And so he was eating lunch a little bit late, so I would sit with him so he wasn't eating lunch alone. And then I started bringing a book to read to him while he was eating his lunch. And then soon I had everybody. And now they call it Grandma Joanne's story time. And I'm thoroughly enjoying myself, and I hope the children are too. But in that capacity, even though I have that background information in early childhood education, I'm not in the role of a professional. But people like grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and people in your community are valuable in your program, but you understand they may not have that specialized knowledge, and that's fine. Then there's the unprofessional. This is the person who has the knowledge and chooses not to use it. Nobody wants to be that person. The unprofessional has the knowledge, but for whatever reason chooses not to use it. And I think that causes us to critically reflect. Why? Why would you have the knowledge and choose not to use it, right? So today, you've maybe from this part of the presentation picked up a few things. Now you have the knowledge. What are you going to do with it, right? And you're going to get more information. What are you going to do with that? Consider where you are and where you want to be in that part of the equation. And I would encourage you, you can get this as a free download online, this article. And I would encourage you to get the article and have a look at it. What a great discussion for your next staff meeting, to have everybody read the article. It's not super long, I think it's maybe 4 pages. Read the article and then talk about it. What does it mean within your group? Okay.
I'm one of you. For 20 plus years, I was on the field. I was working in the field as an educator. I became a director. So my passion comes from, working with the children every day and building up such an awesome team of educators, which I miss very much. That was the joy of my professional life, was working with my team. And that's what has now brought me to where I am today, working with our association. It's the Association of Early Childhood Educators of Alberta, but I'll refer to it as AC because it's much easier to say. And I just think that was such a great segue, Joanne, inspiring us all to think of ourselves as a professional. But we don't want to send you out there on Monday to be inspired and then not necessarily have the mechanisms in place to support you to be a professional in your workplace. Now, we all are doing our very best, and I understand that, and I think you guys, I've referred to us educators as the warriors or the soldiers that have carried the torch for so many years, doing our very best with very little support. And that needs to be recognized. You guys are superheroes in yourself, and I appreciate your work, and it's inspired me to go across the province actually in this last year with my colleagues and have engagement sessions to hear your stories and to be a better advocate for you. So if we are of the people, if we are the voice of the workforce in early learning and childcare, then we need to hear your stories. So this is a very engaging part of the session, so I would love to have you put up your hand or shout out and engage with me. Let me know your stories, ask questions, challenge me, because we don't have all the answers. You have the answers, and we want to implement them and support you with them. So we believe that early childhood educators have the most important job in the world. We believe that you are the heart and soul of a high-quality early learning and care system. And we also believe that you should be well educated, well supported, and well paid. Those go hand in hand, and you'll hear a lot about that. So, a little bit about AECEA, our association, and what we do. If we believe that high-quality childcare system depends on high-qualified educators who deserve fair wages, satisfying work, and supporting working conditions, then we need to have a plan in place. And we do have a plan. I want to direct you to our website. AECEA.ca has our mandate document on the website, and it's an excellent resource if you're preparing any documents, if you're doing any public speaking, or if you're talking with parents or other educators, advocating on behalf of yourself. Use the messages in this well-researched document. We call it the Qualified Educators Quality Care mandate document. So I do encourage you to go to the website and check that out. But all of our work is really in the best interest of children and families, and that will come from you. You are the base of all of that. So we're growing strong at 900. We did have a membership of 1,000 not that long ago, and we give free memberships actually to our students across the province that are taking post-secondary and early childhood education, but their term has come to an end, so those memberships have expired, but I'm hoping that they come back. We're hoping that we've become partners with them as they've been going through their educational journeys, and that they feel valued and supported by the association, and that they find work in the field. We know that we do lose a lot of these graduates to other professions and other work. So our role is really to be there so that they can see pathways into the future for themselves in early learning and childcare. So AECEA is a nonprofit society that is member-based. We are governed by a set of bylaws, and that's overseen by a board of directors. So myself and Joanne sit on the board of directors for our association, and Jennifer, whom you all know probably, who's been organizing the conference, she's also on the board of directors, and we're very lucky to have her as a representative of Southeast Alberta. We also have an appointed advisor as part of our board. Over the last year, we compiled how many hours off the sides of our desk we've put towards our work with this association, and it is equivalent actually to 2.5 full-time positions. So everyone is either a full-time student or they're working in some capacity, and they just believe in the work and the plan that we're going to share with you a little bit about so much that they commit to this work full-heartedly and work very hard. So I just like to always take a moment to appreciate those dedicated volunteers that work on your behalf. So AECEA is the voice of early childhood educators in advocating for higher educational standards, better wages and working conditions, and a comprehensive system supports. Our mission is to transform Alberta's early learning and childcare workforce into a recognized profession. So it's saying that we're not there yet, but we hope to be. We have a plan. So AECEA advocates for the respect, support, and compensation and influence that early childhood educators deserve. AECEA is working to build a future in which well-qualified, well-compensated early childhood educators are respected as professionals, valued for their important work, and supported in providing high-quality childcare for Alberta's children and families. So this has been put together in just the last couple of years, and we've been sharing it with educators around the province, and we've had some emotional responses. People are feeling really connected with these words and really wanting to see our work in our field evolve into this kind of a vision, right? Not just that, I think that we've heard that a lot of educators are starting to feel valued by their parents. The parents are starting to realize the work that we do is hard. I heard that you know, someone said, oh, I couldn't do what you do. They recognize that our work is hard, and it's professional, what we do. It's just that maybe the neighbor across the road, friends that I have for the last 10 years, what do you do anyway? Why do you take this so seriously? Sit down and let's have a conversation, right? So they're just not realizing, and I took that very personally, and I realized I'm the one who needs to change that viewpoint. It's up to me. If I feel professional, I need to share that. I need to demand that. And it's just through knowledge, sharing that knowledge, right? With those who just don't know. I know, I actually, it's so true. I love using that argument when I speak with someone and they said, I don't have grandchildren. My kids are all grown up. You know, this doesn't apply to me. Well, you shut down every business across Alberta. I promise you that's going to impact you in some way, right? Even if you just have to go to the store to get milk. Mm-hmm. And we put our heads down and we work hard and we see the impact we make. We are rewarded every day by the children. But we need to make some noise because they're not realizing how impactful our jobs are. That was a really good example. So in the next few slides, we're just going to sort of go over the landscape of early learning and childcare. But before we do have a video.
So when I started working in the field of early learning and care, I actually had a science degree. And so I started taking courses in early learning and care, and soon enrolled in a master's program at the University of Alberta in early learning. And that was so super rewarding, and worked alongside an amazing bunch of women in a cohort, and we all graduated together. Soon after that, I became aware of a program at the University of Toronto, Early Learning and Care Flex PhD program, because I work in an organization that really believes in lifelong learning. And a lot of my team are completing their degrees and even master's programs now. I felt that in order to walk the talk, I should probably continue with learning as well. So I'm currently in my second year of the PhD program at the University of Toronto.
I'm in the Early Childhood Education After Degree Certificate program at the university. Well, I chose that program because a lot of what I do here at Child Development Day Homes is I supervise staff that are working directly with children. I don't work directly with children anymore, but when people come to me and they ask me for my opinion on a programming situation or a culturally sensitive situation, I need to have some sort of background on where to go with that or how to approach that appropriately. And I was feeling like I was very out of the loop on that piece. As well, a lot of what I do here in the office is I sit in the office all day, so I'm on the phones a lot. So when the educators are calling me to ask me my opinion or help with something, I didn't feel like I had enough of that current knowledge to help. Prior to this, I had a Bachelor of Science in Family Studies. My experience working with children in a childcare setting is also very dated. I haven't done that since I was actually before university and for my first couple of years of university.
Well, it wasn't my original plan. I wanted to go back to school and I wasn't sure what to take, so I wanted to get my Bachelor of Ecology and Human Sciences. When I lived in Red Deer, they didn't have that offered. They had the Early Learning and Childcare program and it looked interesting, so I thought I'd start there because it did transfer into the Human Ecology, but I just stayed in this field after taking it. Well, it's so important because with all the new latest research, it shows that the first 5 years of a child's life are so important. So it's important to have people in this field that are educated and have a passion to care for these children. Well, there's always something to learn. And when I started taking the classes, I had no idea how much you could learn about children and how they develop and their interests and all the theories behind child development as well. And then just also continuing with like current practices, because so much changes in the field over time. So just continuing to take classes kind of keeps you current. I'm hoping to get my degree in early learning. There's supposed to be a degree program coming out sometime. Right now I'm taking open studies at McEwen University, so I can still take relevant classes to further my education that way. I find that taking more classes, learning about different cultures and how different families are, kind of really helps me connect and relate to the families better in the field. It's really rewarding going to the day homes and seeing what the children are doing each time you visit. Every visit is a different experience and you learn so much from the children and what they're doing and just seeing how capable they are when they're playing. It's really important to have access to the Canada Job Grant funding as well as AECEA's funding because it's helped me be able to get my diploma in the field. Without that, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to pursue my diploma in early learning and childcare.
So currently in Alberta, there is actually quite a problem. We have only 16%, enough for 16% of the children who require care have a space. So that means 1 in 4 children only have a place to go, a regulated childcare space to go. So what is happening to the other 3 children that don't have that space? And talking to families, again, it's heart-wrenching. They have to go to work and they're going to lose their job. They don't have a childcare space, and they get desperate. And when you don't have choice and you act on desperation, it's not good results. And so we recognize that, and we want to do something about that. We need to increase the amount of spaces that we have in Alberta, because this is an epidemic. And it's even more serious for those, actually it's 20% for children under 6, but 16% for the out-of-school programs. It sure sounds like we need a system. We need some purposeful planning, some infrastructure to support us, because the current non-system that we have right now isn't working for families, and it's not working for educators. So, and this is just a glimpse of how many early childhood educators we currently have in the workforce, 15,500. And you remember that we have 900 in our membership. So we have a little bit of room to grow. So I just like to put that out there, that the more our membership, the more people we have in our membership, the louder our voice can be to advocate on behalf of you, right? Then we're a true reflection of our membership. So 61%, I don't know if this is alarming to anybody, but 61% of our workforce have less than a 2-year ECE diploma. And this is just sort of a picture. You can have a little glimpse of our current workforce today. So it generally consists of 45% having the 54-hour course as a CDA, and then 16% is the child development worker. However, with that is a lot of the equivalencies that we've been discussing today. So some of them have the foundational knowledge in early childhood education, and some come from different pathways and vocations. And then finally, we have the CDS, the Child Development Supervisor, with the 2-year ELCC or equivalent at 39%. And again, developing the infrastructure. Someone mentioned that, you know, there's waiting lists over here and this person has space available, and it's just really having the infrastructure to support a well-adjusted system for early learning and childcare. Really desperate for the infrastructure. And of course that goes hand in hand with raising the wages. And that is something we're very much looking at different models and advocating on your behalf. So any questions? If you look at this, what time are we done? Just right now. Okay, but just to finish off, and I'm sorry that there's not more time for questions, anything about this? Come and see me afterwards if you want to talk about it, if you have some input, but definitely do the survey, okay, because that's your opportunity to have a voice. Thank you all so very much.